Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Real Estate Startup Podcast. Today, we are doing part 2 with Todd Stromback. He is a realtor in Redding, California, and also a real estate investor. And on the last episode, we heard him talking about out-of-state investing. And what happened in that conversation is we ended up asking him a question that kind of turned into essentially a whole other topic and a whole other podcast. So we just kind of let it keep rolling, and we shifted into a totally different conversation. And you'll just kind of pick up where we left off. But essentially, I was just having this question come to mind, which is really to do with, people that have been Christians that are in ministry or who are pastors or have been in, nonprofit space where, a lot of people are in that space for a while and then they transition out of that and try to go into the marketplace. And sometimes that transition is a little bit tough for people. So I was asking Todd about that because he made that transition. And so it kind of shifted us into a whole other conversation. It was just really, really cool to hear what he had to say. And honestly, I think this was maybe my favorite podcast we've done yet. And I don't know, what do you think about it, Benjamin?
It was incredible. I think Todd is just such a deep well of knowledge and wisdom. And it was fun just hearing him unpacked. And I love these kind of almost like a new idea or concept, this idea of growing your soul versus growing your spirit, man. And I think oftentimes in the church, like he was talking about how there's these spiritual giants that have these huge muscles, and that's because they focus a lot on their spiritual life, but they don't focus on their personal development and growth, which Todd talks a lot about that being your soul. And so that was really interesting to kind of talk about that and how to grow your soul, your personal development, and really just that tension that we see in the church. Why isn't that getting taught? You asked some great questions on, why are our pastors not doing this? Why aren't they talking about it? Not talking about wealth. We're not talking about building up your just living a wealthy. And we dive into wealth that it's not just money, right? Wealth is having time, freedom. It's being healthy. It's having good relationships in your life. And so I think overall, it was just really fun to just go off topic and just kind of flow and see where it went. And it was a great podcast. So
I'm excited. I feel like some of what we talked about might be in a way a little bit controversial when it comes to just some of the core beliefs of maybe the typical Christian sort of box of what is wealth and prosperity and all of that. So we kind of get into some of that nitty gritty, and I'm excited to see where it lands for people. So so let's get after it and let us know what you think down the road. Send us a comment or something, because I'm real curious what people think about this one.
Awesome. It reminds me a lot of Tony Robbins, like his story and his journey. I'm like, that's why that guy's in the room with like high level people all the time.
Totally.
Yeah.
So do you know Tony Robbins is actually, his mentor was Jim Rohn. He was my favorite development guy. That guy, he's a believer, but it's not his main focus of his messaging. It is how to have success in life, which I think is basically soul development. Personal development, to me, when I hear that, I just hear soul development. I think it's the same idea, the same concept.
What are some of his books? Can you dive into like a little bit about him and his books?
He has a lot of books. Recommend? You bet. Yeah. He has a book called Living an Inspired Life that is probably the number one book I'd recommend to especially like a young person starting out. Like I gave it to my nephew when he turned 13. It's pretty thick, but it kind of covers a lot of his main messages. He was a great communicator. So if you can find anything audio from him, he had all these awards for he just was an excellent communicator, like Toastmasters, King of the Universe type of guy. He really is good at speaking. I think on Audible, I've gone through a lot of it. You can just almost put it on just like the background, like you were saying in Tahoe, and you're just going to be getting like gold nuggets just dropping. I think there's like a 20 hours of his just speaking content or something like that. Maybe it's 40 hours. I don't remember. I can put that on and just be getting like revelation. Like to me, Jim Rohn is similar to me in that, like, if you hear Bill Johnson for the first time, and even if you've heard him for 20 years, it's like, as you're listening to him, often just those nuggets of like revelation hit you that just like can be life changing. It's like so revelatory like that. Jim Rohn to me is kind of like that guy in the soul space, similar to how Bill is in like the spirit space. He just has these revelations and perspectives, how he approaches this topic that are profound.
That's awesome.
So Living an Inspired Life is a great book. And then he has one, I think that's called The Four Seasons of Life. I like anything he says, basically, I try to get my hands on. He has a number of books. He has a ton of audio out there. So it's all really good stuff.
I love that.
One thing I know he told Tony Robbins, I think Tony share about, was when he was young, he told Tony to always carry $300 cash in his pocket. Which back then was probably like carrying $1,000 cash. This was probably in like the 80s, not not in an emergency, like you need to use it way. He's like, don't even spend it. You just want to feel like it's like an identity thing of like, you're a wealthy person. You're walking around with $1,000 cash in your pocket. And it's just, he's just smart about that stuff. Like this is like a life hack to like, grow your person, I guess.
Dude,
and I think stuff like that's so fun,
We were just talking about some similar where you talked about how you bought a new outfits because the way you the way you feel with what you wear, you start walking with a different confidence. I feel that way today with this new mic. I ain't gonna lie, these headphones look good. This
you look
mic,
legit.
I sound good. I look good.
Dave Springs gear.
Yeah, you're the full thing. It's good.
It's real. That
needed to happen.
Yes, it did. Thanks to Michaela for challenging me and just poking it the right way.
No, nice. But I mean, for real, it does make a difference. And like, it sounds good. And it's just like, I don't know, it's doing those little things in different areas of our lives to actually push us towards our goal. And also to bring joy into the pockets where we're working really hard. And I don't know. I think it's interesting. Clothing it's a very interesting topic because that's a whole thing. I kind of have like a bit more of like a capsule wardrobe. It's a lot of this same thing kind of. So I just keep it simple. And I know a lot of people get a lot of joy out of, picking out their clothes, especially women maybe in that area. I don't as much, but I still want to make sure I feel like I can be me and feel like I'm can be empowered in certain environments where dressing nicer is required or whatever, but $300, good outfit, good microphone, whatever it is, it's important.
Just those kind of hacks are fun, right? Just like, I think it has to do with confidence and how you feel. And again, like you're saying, the word soul even is like hard to like deal with, in a lot of Christian environments. Feelings is also another word that's like, it's hard to deal with in a lot of Christian environments, but in real life, it is such a powerful thing in any part of life, family, business, community, anything. And that's a space where personal development has a lot to say about that will make people grow and become better at managing their own feelings, helping people feel good around them, which is a definition of leadership. That I think apart from that, we just completely are missing those spaces and we're not growing at all in these spaces that are hugely important for success in business and in the world. So, and even in church and in ministry, like what I started noticing was they weren't talking about it a lot from the platform. And I have theories on why I think that's the case, but being in the backside of that world, I'm like seeing books and stuff. Like I started asking questions like, have you guys read 7 Habits of Highly Effective People? Of course you read that. Like 20 years ago. What do you think of course I have. Like I started noticing things like that. I'm like, I don't know why they don't talk about this as much from the front. I guess this is a spiritual context that we're relating in. So we're just focusing on spiritual things, but like the foundation, even these leaders at Bethel and people around me that I like observed having a lot of success in their life beyond just ministry things, they had that stuff was like a given to them. It was really weird to me. And it is built in actually to the culture, even excellence and these things like that. It's just not articulated as freely, I think, because it just hasn't been able to be received as easily in the church. It's not going to be necessarily a popular message or something that they're prepared to unpack, like on a sermon. If you get them on a fireside chat, you could probably talk about it like this for hours and they'd probably really enjoy it, but it's not something you hear from the pulpit as easily.
Well,
Right.
I want to challenge that because I think maybe I'm just wondering if the language is different, because I think about when I was at BSSM, we all did it. We all did a school of ministry. You know, you're reading books like Culture of Honor. You're reading books like How to Love Your Children, you know, Loving Your Kids on Purpose or whatever that's called. A lot of those books are about wisdom. And you do hear some of these sermons and it's about how to do life well. And so I guess it's like trying to discern, is this a spiritual thing or is this a soul thing? Like, which is it? But I do think there is a lot of talk from up front on practical living, on wisdom, on how to like be a good parent, how to be a good person, good neighbor, all that stuff. So, I mean, does that make sense that there's this kind of like, what's the disconnect? Because I think there is talk of it.
I would agree. I would just, maybe it's about emphasis. You know, I think that soul type of messaging is kind of getting filtered through like a very heavily spiritual front of how it's, you know, delivered. And you almost have to like look for it and grab these pieces of it to try to like synthesize it and get, you know, a lot from it versus it being like, this is going to be a soul type of message. And we're just going to dive into like personal development things that I'm going to teach you the 7 habits of highly effective people one by one.
Well, you know? It depends on, I guess the message with the spiritual aspect could be, this is Jesus or God doing things for us versus like you doing something on your own, right? There's that difference 100%. Of like, well, we pray and God does miracles, right? We pray to God and ask God to help us and do things like that versus we partner with God. God's a creator. And if he created us in his image, then we're creators. So it really empowers his people to be more proactive and more assertive, right? And to do more out of I guess our own strength. But you hear that often in the church that's like, if you're doing it out of your own strength, then you're striving. And so that's a really challenging message of, well, if I'm working hard and it's not easy, then it's not right. Like, God, it should be easy. You hear that prayer, like we want it to be so easy and happen for us. But oftentimes God wants to develop this character and perseverance, and there is suffering. There's hardships. And like you know, in your story about Kansas City, like you went through the fire, but on the other side of it, you're a better man, you're a stronger man because of it.
No, 100%. And I think all these things do integrate, right? Yeah. It's like they're all spiritual, spirit, soul, and body integrates, and all those realms and spaces are important and kind of feed into each other. I just think the soul in particular has been very neglected in the church. And I think that people in general, not just Christians, but it goes into the Christian world as well, struggle with tensions. And I believe my favorite teaching by far I've ever had from Bethel or Life Changing is called All Truth is Not Created Equal by Chris Valentin. If you haven't heard that,
we'll add
I think
it to the list.
Everybody has to hear that message. What's that?
So we'll add it to the list. We'll put it in the show notes because I listen to all these
tonight. Let me know what you think, because that one changed my life probably more than any teaching. I think that's true, more than any teaching I've ever heard. And he talks about how all truth is held in tension. And this idea of soul spirit, that helped me be prepared to hear that, because you even look in the Gospels and stuff and you go, well, people get very confused on this, like you're describing, Ben, of like, well, if I'm striving and I'm earning it, then it's not by grace. And like, this is supposed to be like by grace, and we inherit like things by grace. And he goes, well, is there sowing and reaping? Is that still a message that is communicated in the New Testament? It is. And my understanding is in that tension, both are true. Both have a space. Sowing and reaping is like a soul dynamic. That is very much a part of our life here on earth, as you reap what you sow. So that is like, I'm working for it. I'm hustling for it. I'm earning it. I'm deserving it. That word was really hard for me to accept for a long time. Like the whole word of like the concept of deserve. But it's true in the tension of that's a soul level reality that is true. And it's very true in the world. You get what you deserve. There is another layer to life here, I believe, that is spiritual, that we can access and that does impact our lives as believers, that we uniquely have access to, that is by grace, things can happen. And that's a profound thing. It's not a thing I think that's meant to be like, I don't need to work hard, because that is a thing that people get very confused with when they first hear the grace message, is do anything. And I watched a ton of students when I was managing student housing, 85 of these guys coming through per year. And we got kind of in their life. That was part of our model. So many of them were just not doing anything proactive and powerful and meaningful like that in their life, because it's just like, dude, I don't have to. Jesus does it all.
Dang.
I'm just watching their life.
That is so scary. It's crazy.
But I'm like, they're not wrong from the truths that they're talking about. Right? Like those are truths about life. By grace, we can inherit things. But it's also true that by sowing and reaping, we earn and deserve things. It's just what perspective are we looking at things from? Right? And not being a victim or not having to wait, because we can be proactive and we can be powerful. Rick Joyner has an amazing book on that called Leadership that very few people I know have heard, but he talks a lot about that concept, Ben, that you were bringing up about basically, I don't know the words used, but we don't have to wait. Like mature sons don't come to or daughters don't come to their dad every time they want to do something and, ask if it's okay. They go they kind of live with the green light. And of course, if the dad comes and says, this is a bad idea, maybe they are going to stop. But about being a mature son and daughter in the kingdom and just living with the green light and being powerful and being proactive, it's like a very liberating and freeing concept, and very scary, I think, for a lot of people, which I think is part of why they don't do it.
Well, the contrary to that is that I hear this all the time. I challenged someone the other day that said, I want to do what God wants.
Sure.
You hear that all the time. And there's the tension. Well, what the narrative is that, is there a good? Is there a better? Is there a best? And so there's this narrative of like, okay, I want whatever God has for me. And so I'm like, what is that? And it's that thing you're just saying of like, okay, if I'm taking my daughter to an ice cream shop, I'm not choosing a flavor for her. I don't go in there and say, you have to have vanilla. That's your flavor. Versus a good dad goes in there and says, sweetheart, get whatever flavor you like. And so that's that tension that, I'm wondering is what's that relationship like with God? And it got me thinking of all these different things and just words and meaning. You think about grace, you think about the word bless or being blessed, and you think about luck. Yeah. Like there's these three different words that have completely different meanings to different people. And who is the one that's flowing? Is it from us? Is it from him? And it can be complex.
It is. I think it's all held in tension, right? It is complex and it's all held in tension. And that's not super comfortable for people typically to just live in tension. No. And in one season of life, something that's emphasized is the grace, the inheritance. And you just are finding that when you're in rest and stuff, like amazing things are happening. And I've been in a season like that. But the problem is that that's the only paradigm you have when you're in a season where it is taking the promised land little by little and stewarding and being excellent and managing what you have, and you're not pressing into that and you don't have a paradigm to do that. It's probably not going to go well, So we kind of I think we have to have both to be functioning on all, cylinders and seeing believers fully expressed in the world. I don't know as a group that we've seen much of that yet at all.
Yeah.
I think that it's there, but it hasn't been very out in the open, right? Like even we're talking about it right now. It's like we're kind of trying to figure out how to articulate some of this and piece it together. So I'm actually really excited. I think, like you said, Ben, it's in there. It's kind of in the books and some of the content, but I don't think it's really forward very much yet in the church. But I think it would be awesome if it was. Oh, man. One thing that Bill Johnson said years ago that really struck me, something you said just reminded me of it, is he said, most things that you need in life will be brought to you, but most of what you want, you have to fight for and go get it.
Dang.
Man, that hit me so hard. It's like, especially in America, most of the things you need to survive, you're probably going to get that, but you want to have more, you want to have a life that's amazing. and, powerful and wealth and all that, you're going to have to go get it. And that's just a totally different way of approaching life than, sitting back and just waiting for things to happen.
Well, it can also be looked down upon in the church. But, I get this question of how can you serve God and money?
Sure. Totally.
Yeah.
That is a really tough thing. And I often I'm trying to really pay attention to like, okay, what is my focus? Because there's times where I'm building, you want to be like an achiever. There's these goals, this competitive drive and there's a lot of good in it of I want to add value to the world. You can have the greatest mission possible, right? Of making homes beautiful, adding value to neighborhoods. We think about generational wealth, all these things that are really great, but there could be something in there that is causing a major disconnection with God.
Yeah.
Because it is a hard thing. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. I mean, what do you guys think about that whole concept?
That's another one of those tensions, right? Like riding that line of just constantly asking the Lord, like, is what I'm going after, like, hold me accountable. If at any point you see that my heart is veering in the wrong direction, like align me. I think that's the road that I feel like I'm on in this journey, having come out of many years of ministry and always having one foot interested in the marketplace, but not really having the open door like I do now. And so now that I'm in that space that I've kind of been like, oh, that'd be interesting to see what would happen if I could put more time and really go after it. Now I'm here and I'm like, okay, Lord, keep me aligned, because the whole point is to be generous, right? The whole point is to be able to give and bless other people. And at least for me, that's kind of where I'm like, I see the opportunity. The people I most want to be like are people that have typically worked really hard to get where they are. They've had the level of breakthrough financially, and they're now able to literally change the world because they're a generous soul. And I think that's where we get to just ride that tension out, like you're talking about, Todd. It's just like, it's hard to understand. And I think it also is like the mystery of God. It's like, we don't really ever fully understand how this works, and we haven't fully ever arrived, but there's so much opportunity here. I don't want to miss it. I don't know. What do you think?
I totally agree. I think it is walking with God in these tensions. And the more that you have these categories that you're open to, I think it just creates a lot more space for this, like I think you said, this ride and this adventure with God in life. And I just, my heart would be for all believers to just have access to these spaces that I think traditionally we haven't in the church, to have an awesome life, to make an impact, even have that kind of a vision, to even care about that stuff. So yeah, I think part of it, honestly, in my journey, I've noticed part of it, I think, is just being honest. A lot of people struggle to be honest with what they really do want and feel. You're kind of shamed into you're supposed to think these ways, you're supposed to want or not want these things. I think that's a foundation. It was for me. One of the things that really helped was a breakthrough and kind of set me free in that way was, I think it was Chris that taught on this when I was in BSSM, talking about King David. And I had read the Bible multiple times before I came to Bethel, and I had never noticed what he pointed out in this teaching. I think it's in the teaching series called Leadership for the New Epic Transition. Did you guys ever hear about that one? It's kind of an older one. No. It was like 2010, 2012.
I think I did listen to part of that. I have this vague memory of driving to Reno from Redding and listening.
Like we were saying, a lot of that soul type content came through in that series. It's a 3-part series. Yeah. It's really long. I think part 3 especially was very practical leadership and management wisdom. And one of the messages, I think it was called Reward. And Chris just talking about how humans are wired for reward. And in leading them, there needs to be rewards you're putting in front of them to lead them, in a healthy way and lead them well. And he talked about King David and how when David fought Goliath, what I've always heard emphasized growing up in the church was how zealous he was for God and his passion for God. That spiritual component of, how dare you taunt the armies of the living God and all that stuff that is part of that story. That's really cool. But I never even heard was, and Chris pointed this out, that they actually said, if someone kills Goliath, here's the things that they're going to get. And it was like, you get the king's daughter, you get tax-free status in Israel, you get all this really cool stuff. And it actually says that multiple times, twice at least, David said, what do you get again? What does the man get that kills, this Philistine? And it just helped me realize that, I don't want to be more spiritual than Jesus. That's a good, I think, line that people have used, in the last 10 years. Like, don't try to be more spiritual than Jesus, who, for the joy set before him, went through what he went through to get what he wanted. So don't try to be more spiritual than Jesus. And I also don't want to try to be more spiritual than the man after God's own heart, King David, who went after Goliath, not just because he loved God and was passionate about God, but also at the same time, because there were some pretty amazing rewards that were put in front of him to go after that challenge. So
on this earth,
it just
not
on this earth, like
not heavenly rewards, earthly rewards. It's in the Bible.
Yes. And I feel like Jesus is constantly saying things like that too, that are like both, like there's spiritual heavenly rewards and there is soul level earth rewards. And he's like, manage these talents well and you'll get more. Like ask, seek, like, it'll come back to you more. Like, I think it's meant to be both and it's meant to be an attention, but we have just so focused and emphasized on the spiritual side to the neglect of the soul, and sadly just a life experience for Christians that isn't what it could be.
Well, another thing to think about is, you got to take the context of the teacher. So if you think about Bill and Chris, who are pastors and who have been very successful, right? They've built a movement. Yeah. They've built wealth, and it's been based on the foundation of spiritual matters, right? They've written books, they get paid to travel and speak. They've become very successful largely to their relationship with God. And so that's what they teach on. And so I guess if that's the only place you go to drink and that's your source, then you're, like you said before, your spiritual man is going to be much heavier than your soul man. And if you're not going and hearing, I guess, learning wisdom in other ways, it could be a little heavy one way versus the other, right?
And totally justifiably so, in a place people are going to that's called a supernatural school of ministry. Yeah. Like you would expect the emphasis to be spiritual and supernatural are the same word in, New Testament. So of course that's going to be emphasized, and it should be in that context. I would love it if they had a school of soul development and you just focus on this side of things. Like something that hit me recently when I was talking to somebody is that scripture about I desire above all things, the John verse. Weird it is to think about that this is the Apostle John writing this, who I would say from the Gospels perspective, maybe the most spiritual of them. He was the mystical one talking about the word of God before the earth and, all those types of concepts and the special love, connection he had with God and all that. He said, I desire above all things, talking to his, spiritual children, that you would prosper and be in good health, even as your soul prospers. And I realized as a dad myself, now I got a teenager now and I have an 8-month-old baby and I got one, in between. Man, like, do I want them to have a great spiritual life? Of course I do. Of course I do. But if I think about what I really want for them in their life, I'm like, I emotionally connect to, I want them to be healthy and to prosper in their life. Mm-hmm. Those are the things I just really can touch very, very deeply. And then I hope whatever their spiritual life is, that of course it's amazing. And that's like a key to, everything. But like, it's just weird that he wanted more than anything for them to be healthy and to prosper. It's like, there's something to that. I think it comes from a father culture. And I think that's part of what also I think most people are aware of we're missing, and we're trying to get back to that. But that whole connection between fathers and their children, I think this stuff comes from fathers a lot, this wisdom for life. And I think that's part of why it's, we don't see as much of it in the church, sadly.
And we also have different interpretations of prosperity. So what does it mean to prosper?
I'm pretty sure it can have a broad meaning, I think, but I bet if we looked up what prosperity means, it's probably going to be pretty clear that it's going to be talking about, at least in some measure. Well, but even if it's not, like health and prosperity, whatever it means, it's got to at least include that, right? As a piece of it. Like if prosperity means a broader, just you having a great life, wealth is a necessary component typically to having that. Not for maybe every human, but it would be an exception that it's not, right?
Yeah.
A very interesting, unique life that doesn't require that.
Right. Well, wealth, it seems like now wealth is kind of, people say time freedom, like having a good lifetime, being healthy, and then having the resources, the money, the assets to be able to do what you want, right? That's kind of like wealth isn't just money. It's, the other things as well. Relationships, being happy.
I think wealth.
Good.
No, I didn't mean to cut you off. Yeah. No, I totally agree with you. Yeah. I think another thing you see is people that don't have a spiritual component often end up accumulating a lot of wealth, but not having peace and happiness with it. So that's not a win either. So that's where all these things I think need to kind of be in place to really have a fully good life, which one of my favorite teachers is Ty Lopez. You guys know about him?
No.
Have you ever seen on YouTube, he had these really like funny commercials like a few years ago that people really teased him about, where he's like, here I am in my garage with my Lamborghini and his bookshelves. He got a lot of crap. It would like get your attention and it seemed really cheesy, but he's a great teacher. Anyway, he has a paradigm for what he calls the good life that he's extracted from ancient philosophers. And it has 4 pillars to it. It's health, wealth, love, and happiness or fulfillment. And I think that paradigm's made a lot of sense to me. And it's come down through the ages of just thinkers, philosophers talking about what does it take to live a fully good life?
Yeah.
And it kind of takes all those. And he's like, very rare that a human has all of those. You'll find some with wealth, but often their health sucks. Their relationships are terrible and they're not happy. And that's not a good life. That's 1 out of 4. You find people that have a great love life, but they don't have wealth. Maybe their health is good, but they don't have wealth and they're not very happy actually. So it's like that, I think, is like, again, this is a tension. Like we don't pick one, we seek all 4 of those, but you need to feel permission as a Christian, I think, to go after all that stuff.
Yeah.
And I think often we don't,
Yeah. I think, and we can kind of, I could just keep going. I think this topic is so cool to talk about, but I think I'm trying to formulate a thought I have. And I think it's kind of going back to having spent so many years on the mission field or doing ministry, and then now being, just good friends with a lot of pastors in my area. And, maybe not necessarily like lead pastors, but more like supporting staff. Just kind of behind closed doors and conversations I've had with different friends, I think it really has made me, surprised at the level of, and I want to be careful because, I don't know who's going to listen and I want to be really honoring, but I think my tension in this is ultimately I have felt very burdened and sad at the level of poverty that is in the church when it comes to people on staff at churches often don't really know how to get out of that cycle of paycheck to paycheck. And this speaks to different churches have different budgets and different regions can pay more and so forth. But generally speaking, I'm not just talking like one church, I'm talking a lot of different churches. I feel like these people are so incredible when it comes to the Spirit. And I so look up to them and can connect on all these ways. And then there's this whole other side of things where, a lot of people are even to me kind of confiding in just what do I do? They're kind of like, what do I do? How do I build wealth? Because I don't want to leave my job. I love what I do, but how do I build a life that is abundant and not just surviving? And so I think this is where I've more and more I've just felt like this tension of how do we as marketplace ministers or whatever you want to call it, how do we get these people that are so precious in our communities that are serving day in and day out? We need them to be pastors, I want them to be pastors, but I want them to be living lives that are just really full of abundance and thriving. Does this make sense? I'm kind of just, but
agreed.
For sure.
Yeah.
I think there's a fixed mindset, they get so focused on this one thing where it's like, okay, God is going to provide. I don't need to do these other things, where you do see some pastors and people in ministry that have rental properties. They have investments in stocks. And I think it comes back to an education. Education is a problem where the education system is grooming employees. They're trying to make you an employee or a student, essentially the same thing, where it's like, this is what we're grooming young people to become, versus like they're teaching you what to think, not how to think. When you go to that level of how to think, then you're starting to create, you're thinking like an entrepreneur, a business owner, an investor. And so I think that's like one of the missing pieces in there, where either now that this needs to be taught, but it needs to be taught in the home, right? Like fathers, mothers, they can be teaching their children how to do these things, how to build wealth, become financially free, because it's not happening in the schools.
I totally agree with that. I think the context of where I get like curious and maybe a little frustrated is I feel like it's missing in the church. And this is where a lot of these people they've worked through, they're already, out of the house, and they're in their like adult years. And now they're kind of like, I don't know anything about finances, or maybe not nothing, but like, how do I move my life in a direction and change the trajectory in a way that I can be thriving? And I totally agree with you, Benjamin. I think we need to from the ground up, be teaching these things. But I think just thinking in the church context, it's made me more passionate about, I guess, just having these conversations inside of the church and giving people space to learn. But then it's kind of goes back to that thing of like, well, we're here to learn about spiritual things. We're not really here to like train you in business, but like, then I have pastors coming to me that are like, I have no money. How do I do this? And I'm like, okay, there's gotta be a way. So I like to strategize with them. But I don't know, Todd, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's hard, right? Because it's kind of like finding someone, like I said, if you could see what their soul looks like that person. Like, I think if you could see their spirit, if they're a pastor, most likely, especially if they're in like our spaces, your spirit's probably super strong, super fit. It's got like a 6-pack and stuff. Like, they probably got some good strength going on in their spirit. A lot of strength there. Their giftings they've developed, their prophetic, maybe their prayer life,
totally,
whatever. Like serious like muscle going on there. And if you could see their soul, like I'm picturing like, just this totally atrophied, shriveled thing that never gets a demand even put on it or effort given to grow it. There's just nothing there. It's like such an extreme, I think, for most of these people. They've never intentionally even had one workout in their life to develop their soul. It by accident just happens because you are having to talk to people. So you're communicating, you're using your brain a bit, you're using your mind, you're surviving, but they've never done a workout for their soul. Like we're describing, where you're reading personal development, you're listening to that kind of stuff, you're going to conferences, you're doing, that kind of personal development work. So it's like, that's going to be a journey, I think, for that person, where you're starting as if you're a personal trainer with someone who's never done a workout once in their life. They don't have a good diet. They don't know how to lift a weight. They don't know how to do anything.
Right.
They've never exercised. And it's like, you're probably going to start real slow, but there is hope of like, this might take time, but maybe in, 1, 3, 5 years, there's going to be a transformation and things are going to start happening in their life. That's going to be a growth curve.
Yeah. It's
Okay.
good.
So I think barring a miracle, which obviously, that's possible, there's just a practical path to grow with people in this space.
Yeah.
I just want
and there's no need to wait for a miracle,
Right.
Yeah. What are you going to say, Benjamin?
I just want to ask you, just to get some context of what you mean. Are you referring to that you want to see this kind of shift or change happening with like the staff of a church, like pastors and things like that? Like you want to see this dialogue and this training and equipping within the leadership? Or are you saying you want to see this start to happen with the leadership communicating more of this to the body of the church?
Oh, that's a great question. I think both. But I think what I'm seeing is that I guess the first part of it is that I'm seeing a lot of people that are in ministry working on staff at a church or a nonprofit, or here in Nashville, a lot of musicians that are in a similar boat. What I'm seeing is that demographic. There's, like you were saying, I think it was Todd saying, I don't know, or Benjamin saying that there are certain kind of people out there that have rentals, or they've built wealth, or they've done crypto, or they've gotten really creative. And to those people, I'm like, wow, how did you do that? You found a way to steward this on the side. And that's always very interesting to me when I meet those people. There's a whole other demographic of people that are just like, I know the word inside and out. I understand that this is my inheritance. I don't know how to get there. And so I think that's where I'm like, in order for the church to get to a point where they can even speak about it, and maybe a church like Bethel is a little bit different just because I do think that they're ahead of the curve in some of those areas, at least from my kind of outside perspective. But a lot of other churches that I feel like I interact with, and like amazing churches too, it's like I really don't hear much about the, marketplace things or business things, because I think a lot of it boils down to the staff themselves just are not equipped to teach on it, because it's just not the muscle, like you're saying, it's just not the muscle they've been working on. So yeah, I mean both, but I think it would start with internally for people to just really, it's coming from a personal burden of having dear friends in my life where I'm like, oh, like I thought that this was probably fine. And then when I kind of go a little bit deeper, I'm like, shoot, like you're like working really hard on the side so your family can cover their mortgage and you're a full-time pastor. Like, how did we get here? This is not okay, But, and that's not pointing to anyone or any church specifically. I think I've just more and more been like, this is a passion point, I think, where I just would love to see that begin to shift a bit more.
It'd be fun to find some stats, some data on how many pastors are second, third, fourth generation pastors compared to, maybe first generation pastors. Because I do think that maybe, some of the ones that have learned how to build wealth, aside from being full-time in ministry, I think that it might be a product of their upbringing where, maybe their parents or their grandparents were business owners or investors. And so they got that knowledge passed down from the family. I think that happens a lot. I would be curious to see, how many like pastors' parents were pastors and grandparents were pastors, and compared to like how many, are the first generation believers maybe, and what they bring their kind of like normal growing up to the table. And so I think that might have something to do with, who's doing it and who's not.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It comes back down to, I think a lot of it comes back down to like really understanding your worth and how, who your dad is, knowing who your dad is. Because if you don't know who that is and you don't know your value, and even if you have that really strong spiritual muscle, I don't know, there's something that comes back down to just like being believed in that you can actually do a thing and succeed at it. So basic things. But anyway, shall we wrap this thing up here?
Yeah, I feel it's been awesome.
Yeah, this was really good, Todd. Thank you so much for just bringing your wisdom and conversation. That was super fun.
Yeah.
Well, we definitely got to have you back, because clearly one session turned into two and it could have gone to more. So yeah, I think this was really encouraging on a lot of levels. And I feel like probably Benjamin and I need to debrief and figure out like what just happened, because I feel like it just stirred up a lot more conversations in my heart. And so, speaking of it, so it's good. Awesome. All right. Well, bless you, and we will see you soon.
We'll be in touch. See you, Todd.
See you later.
Bye.
Bye. And
is there any questions you want to ask? Just like you always ask fun questions at the end, Michaela, to kind of wrap it up.
Yeah. I mean, just kind of outside of the context of real estate and I guess business, what would you say are, I mean, I like to ask what a good book is that you recommend, but this whole thing has been filled with like books, which is so awesome. I'm going to have to go back through and just like get all of those. But what would you say you and your family do aside, like what's something you guys do just to like, I don't know, unwind, and how do you have fun? Not even how do you have fun? How do you guys as a family chase wonder? What does that look like for you?
Whoa, gosh, I wish I had a really cool answer for that. We have had an interesting season of life where I had some health setbacks, which I kind of mentioned around the same time I had bought those houses in Kansas City. That really slowed us down being able to do, I guess, right, what you're saying, like adventurous things. I almost couldn't walk for
Dang.
about 3 years. I'd go show one house and I'd come back and just crash for like the rest of the day and just be like exhausted. And
Wow.
it was a really weird season of life. So we're still pulling out of that. And every year I've been getting better for the last few years. So I think we're figuring out what we do for fun as a family. We have a farm property that we've really enjoyed being on. So we spend time outside on our farm. We have a place to go now at Lake Almanor, which is a lake about an hour and a half from where we live. That's really beautiful. So getting out on the boat, getting out on the water, just, of course, we love getting out in nature, right? Whatever it takes to get out in nature is kind of a basic thing for us. But my not cool answer that is true and that has been part of our season as a family is we've really actually enjoyed playing video games together. And I want to share that because I think a lot of people can feel like shame about that or like it's not cool enough. And just being real, like that was something that we actually could do as a family that was fun and had some level of adventure to it that we could interact on together. So in my perfect life, would video games be a main part of it? Probably not. But in reality, in certain seasons of life, you do what you can do. And that's been something that actually has been a lot of life and a lot of fun for us in the last few years.
Yeah, I actually really love that answer. And I'm grateful that you shared that just because I think, again, it kind of speaks to some of the theme of both of these podcasts, just being okay with stepping outside of the box of what is maybe presented to us again in the church as like, what is the thing you have to stay within these bounds. I think in certain seasons the Lord opens certain doors and maybe it's video games for a season and that's okay. And more than okay, it's probably really fun.
It's really fun.
Yeah. I mean, my brother works for Oculus. He's a high level manager for Oculus, which is owned by Meta, which is the VR company. So,
cool. Yeah.
I mean, it supplies income to my family. So we're grateful.
That's awesome. I'm not at that level yet with the full VR thing. We've done it a couple times, but that's next level. So it's
kind of wild. You kind of have to, you can get sick if you're not careful. It's kind of crazy, but anyways, well, bless you. Thank you so much for your time. And yeah, Benjamin, you have anything else you want to add?
Yeah, I want to add one more thing. Just what we were talking about earlier, just the whole like idea of building wealth and stewarding finances. I came across something pretty cool recently. I just want to throw it out there as a resource. And it's the book called Die with Zero. A good friend of mine is all about it. And he sent me a podcast, Bill Perkins podcast, that talks about memory dividends, time buckets. And I've listened to part of it and it's really interesting. It talks a lot about, using your money when you have like good health, when your kids are young, when you just maximize the season, right? Versus like oftentimes we want to have all this money when we're 85 and we can't do the things that we want to do.
Totally.
So why don't we like use our money when we're at our peak, at
I love
our
that.
best health?
Yeah.
So it's this really interesting concept. It could be something we can dive into at some point, but it's another resource to kind of check out. And I just thought I'd share it. And then last, I just want to say, Todd, to you, just encourage you and say, man, you're such a great communicator. I always love our conversations. It always feels like we can go, the conversations could go on for hours with just the depth that you have. You have so much depth and like ability to take a conversation really anywhere. And so I love that about you. And I also really think that you're meant to communicate more. I'm like, man, I wish Todd had a podcast. I wish Todd was actually more vocal on social media, because I just think that like you have so much in you. You have so many messages and wisdom that it needs to be shared. You need to share it, dude. So you heard it here. Everyone, Todd needs to start sharing more of his stuff to the world. Write a book, podcast, whatever.
Yeah, well, that's really encouraging, man, honestly, because I would love to find a way to do that I felt like was right for me, and that I felt good about. So maybe you can help me figure that out, you guys. That would be sweet.
Yeah.
Well, we really got to have you back because clearly one session turned into two and it could have gone to more. So really, we'll do it. We'll do it for sure. And I think this was really encouraging on a lot of levels. And I feel like probably Benjamin and I need to debrief and figure out like what just happened, because I feel like it just stirred up a lot more conversations in my heart and soul. Speaking of it.
Nice.
So it's good. Awesome. All right. Well, bless you, and we will see you soon.
Okay. Thanks so much, you guys. Take care.
We'll be in touch. See you, Todd.
See you later.
Bye.